A billionaire tech mogul, his stunning mistress, and a multi-million-dollar yacht slicing through the sapphire waters of the Amalfi Coast. It's the kind of picture-perfect escape most people only dream of. But this dream was built on a foundation of lies. Thousands of miles away in their cold, opulent New York penthouse, his 7 months pregnant wife, the silent architect of his entire empire, wasn't crying into a pillow. She was on a secured line with her lawyer, while he was popping vintage champagne and basking in the sun of his betrayal. She was methodically orchestrating the financial siege of a lifetime. This isn't just a story about a woman scorned. It's about a queen pushed to the edge methodically, taking back her kingdom one frozen asset at a time. The penthouse apartment on Park Avenue was less a home and more a curated museum of success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of Manhattan, the city lights twinkling below like a carpet of fallen stars. Every surface was either polished marble rare wood or brushed chrome. For Isabella Rossi, it had started to feel like the most beautiful prison in the world. At 32, Isabella possessed a quiet, intelligent beauty that was often overshadowed by her husband's bombastic charisma. Ethan Sterling, the golden boy of the fintech world, was a force of nature. His company, Nexus Pay, had revolutionized digital transactions, and the media adored him. They painted him as a lone genius, a visionary who'd built a billion-dollar empire from a garage. The truth, as it often is, was far more complex. Isabella, with her master's in economics and a mind for strategy as sharp as a shard of glass, had been there from the very beginning. It was her algorithm that formed the core of Nexus Pay's security protocol. It was her business plan that had secured their first round of angel investors. She was the architect. He was the face. In the early days, they were a team, an unstoppable duo fueled by late nights, cheap takeout, and a shared dream. But success had a way of eroding memories. As their net worth skyrocketed, Ethan's ego inflated with it. The shared dream slowly became his dream. Her contributions became footnotes in his grand narrative. He started calling her insights cute and her concerns overly cautious. He loved her, she believed, but he had stopped seeing her as an equal. He saw her as another one of his beautiful acquisitions, like the Picasso in the hallway or the rare sports car in the garage. Now, 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son, Isabella felt the distance between them stretch into a chasm. The baby was supposed to bring them closer, a new joint venture to reignite their partnership. Instead, it seemed to have pushed Ethan further away. He was more restless than ever, his phone perpetually glued to his hand, his nights filled with investor dinners that stretched into the early hours of the morning. The signs were there, like tiny cracks in a masterpiece, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. A faint scent of a perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his suit jacket. A credit card bill with a charge for a $500 lunch at a romantic bistro she'd never been to. 2 tickets for a Broadway show on a night he claimed he was working late. Each one was a small sting, a prick of doubt she tried to suppress. She was pregnant, hormonal, she told herself. She was being paranoid. This evening, the tension in the apartment was thick enough to taste. Ethan was pacing the length of the living room, dressed in a tailored linen suit that screamed effortless wealth. He was agitated, checking his watch every few seconds. "You're sure you'll be okay, Izzy?" he asked, the nickname grating on her nerves. He only called her Izzy when he was trying to placate her. "I'll be fine, Ethan," she replied, her voice calm and even. She was sitting in a plush armchair, one hand resting protectively on the curve of her belly. The baby kicked a small, reassuring flutter. "It's just a week. Olivia said she'd be on standby if I need anything." Olivia Parker was her best friend, a no-nonsense art curator who had never been fully charmed by Ethan Sterling. She saw the man, not the myth. "It's just, this deal in Monaco is crucial." Ethan continued, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed, sandy blonde hair. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is playing hardball. I have to be there in person, on their turf. He gestured vaguely, as if to encompass the entire French Riviera. It means schmoozing networking. A lot of it will be on a yacht. You know how these things are. Isabella knew. She had been to dozens of those events with him in the early years. She knew the language of money and power, the forced smiles, the veiled negotiations that happened over canapes and cocktails. She also knew that a sovereign wealth fund negotiation didn't typically require a week-long yacht excursion. I understand, she said, her gaze unwavering. It's for the company, exactly, for us. For the baby, he said a little too quickly. He walked over and kissed the top of her head. His kiss felt fleeting, perfunctory. I'll be back before you know it, and I'll bring you back something amazing, something shiny. He thought he could placate her with trinkets. The old Ethan would have known that all she wanted was him, his time, his attention. This new Ethan thought his absence could be filled with diamonds. Just be safe, she murmured. As he walked out the door, his expensive leather carryall slung over his shoulder, Isabella felt a cold dread settle deep in her bones. It wasn't the thought of being alone that scared her. It was the sudden gut-wrenching certainty that he wasn't going alone. The lie was too big, his performance too slick. She waited for a full 10 minutes, listening to the silence of the vast apartment. Then, with a resolve that surprised even herself, she stood up and walked to his office. It was her office too, technically. The company had been born at the large mahogany desk that now served as his corporate throne. His laptop was closed, password protected, of course. But she didn't need his laptop. She knew his life, his routines, his digital footprint better than he did. He was arrogant, but he was also a creature of habit. He had a backup cloud service, one he'd set up years ago, and likely forgotten, which mirrored his phone's data. It was an old security measure they had implemented together when the company was still vulnerable. He thought she had forgotten. She had forgotten nothing. With trembling fingers, she logged into the service using the old master credentials she had created herself. A few clicks and a recent backup began to populate on her screen. Photos, messages, call logs. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and morbid curiosity. She clicked on the photo gallery. The most recent images were mundane. Screenshots of stock prices, a picture of his car, a selfie at the gym. Then she scrolled further back to the last few weeks. Her breath caught in her throat. There she was, Sienna Hayes, a raven-haired, impossibly beautiful lifestyle influencer Isabella had seen mentioned on gossip sites. In one photo, she was laughing, head thrown back, in a restaurant Isabella recognized from the credit card bill. In another, she was wearing a silk robe that looked suspiciously like the one from the master bathroom closet, a robe he had told her was a gift for his sister. But the final picture was the one that shattered Isabella's world into a million tiny pieces. It was a screenshot of a booking confirmation. A private yacht, the Serenity, chartered for 7 days, sailing the Amalfi Coast. The charter was under a corporate name, but the passenger manifest listed 2 names, Ethan Sterling and Sienna Hayes. The dates matched his Monaco business trip exactly. Isabella stared at the screen, the glossy image of the yacht mocking her. The air was knocked from her lungs, replaced by an icy calm. The heartbreak was immense, a physical pain that radiated from her chest. But beneath the pain, something else was stirring. A cold, hard fury. He hadn't just lied to her. He had insulted her intelligence. He had taken the woman he was sleeping with on a lavish vacation while his pregnant wife sat at home waiting. He was using company funds, their funds, to finance his sordid affair. She thought of the baby, her son. What kind of world was she bringing him into? One where his father was a liar, a cheat, one where his mother was a passive, heartbroken victim. No. She closed the laptop. The trembling in her hands stopped. The tears that had threatened to fall evaporated, replaced by the fire of resolve. He had underestimated her. He had mistaken her quiet nature for weakness. He had forgotten who she was, what she was capable of. She walked back into the living room and looked out at the city lights. They no longer looked like a beautiful carpet. They looked like a kingdom. Her kingdom. An empire she had built. Ethan Sterling thought he was sailing off to paradise. He had no idea he was actually sailing straight into the eye of a hurricane. And Isabella Rossi was the storm. For the first 24 hours after Ethan's departure, Isabella did nothing. She moved through the motions of her life in a state of suspended animation. She ate. She attended a prenatal yoga class. She spoke to her mother on the phone, her voice a perfect imitation of normalcy. But inside, a seismic shift was occurring. The grief was still there, a raw, gaping wound. But the fury was crystallizing, sharpening into a diamond-hard point of purpose. She wasn't just a wife who had been cheated on. She was a founder who had been defrauded. He wasn't just using their personal money. He was hemorrhaging funds from Nexus Pay, the company she had poured her blood, sweat, and intellect into. The yacht, the private jets, the extravagant gifts. For Sienna, it was all being funneled through opaque corporate expense accounts. He had set up accounts he thought she had no knowledge of. The breaking point, the moment her grief fully transmuted into action, came from the source of the betrayal itself, Sienna Hayes. Sienna was a creature of the digital age. Her existence was validated by likes, her life curated for public consumption. Even though she was clearly trying to be discreet, her addiction to validation was her undoing. On the second day of the trip, a photo appeared on Instagram. It wasn't on Sienna's main feed, but she was tagged in it. A fellow influencer, some vapid party boy named Chad, had posted a group shot from the deck of a yacht. The caption read, "Living the dream on the Italian coast. So blessed to be with this amazing crew." In the background, unmistakable against the azure water, was the sleek profile of the Serenity. And there, in the center of the group, was Sienna, draped in a barely there bikini, her arm linked possessively with Ethan's. Ethan had a flute of champagne in his hand and a wide, careless smile on his face. He looked utterly untroubled. A king in his floating castle. The photo was a digital dagger to Isabella's heart. Seeing the static image of the booking confirmation was one thing. Seeing him so happy, so brazenly public with his mistress, was another. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He was flaunting it. He thought her so far removed from his world, so naive, that she would never see it. That was his second critical mistake. Isabella saved the photo. Then she did what any modern woman would do. She went down the digital rabbit hole. She clicked on Chad's profile, then on the profiles of everyone else tagged. She pieced together the narrative of their trip through a tapestry of Instagram stories, tagged photos, and fleeting video clips. There was Sienna posing at the bow of the yacht, the wind whipping through her hair, with a caption full of inspirational nonsense about manifesting your destiny. There was a video of Ethan buying Sienna a ridiculously expensive diamond bracelet in a boutique in Capri, the shop's name clearly visible. There was a blurry clip of them, dancing at an exclusive cliffside club, his hands possessively on her waist. It was a meticulous chronicle of his betrayal, broadcast for the world to see if they only knew where to look. And Isabella knew. She saved every photo, every video, every caption. She was no longer just a wife. She was an investigator, a prosecutor, building an airtight case. Her best friend Olivia came over that evening, taking one look at Isabella's pale set face and knowing instantly that something was terribly wrong. "Izzy, what is it? Is it the baby?" Olivia asked, her voice laced with concern. Isabella simply turned her laptop screen towards her friend. She didn't have to say a word. Olivia's eyes scanned the collage of betrayal Isabella had assembled. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to pure, unadulterated rage on Isabella's behalf. "That absolute son of a bitch!" Olivia hissed, her usual art world poise completely gone. "While you're here pregnant with his child, I'm going to kill him. No, that's too good for him. I'm going to sue him into oblivion." "That's the general idea," Isabella said, her voice eerily calm. Olivia looked at her, surprised by her friend's composure. You're not crying. I did my crying yesterday, Isabella replied, her hand coming to rest on her belly. Tears won't protect this baby's future. Tears won't secure the company I built. He thinks I'm just the wife, the quiet, supportive spouse he can leave behind while he goes and plays. He forgot that I know where every single dollar in that company is. He forgot that my name isn't just on our marriage certificate. It's on the founding documents. It's on the patents. It's on the master access protocols for our entire financial network. A slow smile spread across Olivia's face. Oh my God. He really has no idea, does he? None. Isabella confirmed. He sees a pregnant woman. He should have remembered he was dealing with the woman who designed the vault. That night, Isabella barely slept. She lay in their cavernous bed, the empty space beside her, a cold reminder of his absence. But she wasn't thinking about his infidelity anymore. She was thinking about strategy. She was mapping out a plan, a corporate decapitation strike, so swift and so precise that he would never see it coming. She wasn't just going to leave him, she was going to financially neuter him. She would strip him of the assets he was using to humiliate her. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about protecting her legacy and her child's future from the reckless, arrogant man her husband had become. The next morning, she woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. The fog of doubt and hurt had lifted, leaving behind the cold, clear light of purpose. She picked up her phone, her fingers steady, and dialed a number she hadn't called in a long time, but had kept for just such an emergency. The phone was answered on the second ring. Abigail Chen, Law Offices. Abigail Isabella, said her voice firm. It's Isabella Rossi. I need to see you. Today. It's urgent. There was a brief pause on the other end, then the crisp, professional voice of one of New York's most feared corporate lawyers. Isabella. Of course. My 1 o'clock just cancelled. Does that work for you? Perfectly, Isabella replied. We have an empire to dismantle. As she hung up the phone, she caught her reflection in the dark screen. Her eyes were clear, her expression determined. The victim was gone. In her place stood a queen ready to checkmate the king. The offices of Chen & Associates were located in a sleek glass tower in Midtown, a world away from the flashy startup culture of Nexus Pay. The atmosphere was one of quiet, lethal competence. The carpets were thick, the wood dark, and the air smelled of old books and money. Abigail Chen was a petite woman with an iron will and a mind that moved like a supercomputer. She and Isabella had met years ago at a Women in Tech conference and had formed a bond based on mutual respect. Abigail had followed Nexus Pay's rise and knew better than most of Isabella's foundational role. She greeted Isabella not with pity, but with a firm handshake. Isabella, you look resolved. I am, Isabella said, settling into a leather chair opposite Abigail's sprawling desk. She didn't waste time with small talk. She laid out the situation with chilling precision, presenting the evidence she had collected the yacht. Charter, the social media, posts the credit card statements she'd accessed through their joint accounts. Abigail listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. She steepled her fingers, her sharp eyes missing nothing. When Isabella was finished, Abigail simply nodded. Classic textbook narcissism and reckless endangerment of corporate assets, Abigail stated as if diagnosing a common illness. The infidelity is a personal matter. The misuse of company funds for non-business related activities with a non-employee, that's a corporate matter, a very serious one. I want to freeze him out, Isabella said, her voice low and intense. Completely. The joint personal accounts, the corporate cards, the access to the Nexus Pay operational funds he's been using as his personal slush fund. Abigail leaned forward. This is more complex than freezing a joint checking account, Isabella. Ethan is the CEO. He holds the majority voting shares. On paper, he controls the company. On paper, Isabella agreed. But he's forgotten about the Isabella protocol. Abigail raised an eyebrow. I don't believe I'm familiar with that. A faint, wry smile touched Isabella's lips for the first time that day. You wouldn't be. It's not in any official document. It was a failsafe I built into the company's financial architecture in the first year. Ethan was brilliant, but he was always reckless. I was worried a competitor might try a hostile takeover, or that he might make a catastrophic deal without thinking it through. So I created a series of encrypted access keys and transfer protocols. They require dual authorization for any expenditure over a certain very high threshold. My authorization. And he agreed to this. He did. At the time, he thought it was a brilliant security measure to protect us. Over the years, as the company grew, the system became more complex. I retained the master key. He's the public face, the king. But I built the castle walls, and I still hold the keys to the treasury. He's forgotten that the system he uses every day to move millions of dollars still has my silent, digital fingerprint on its core programming. Abigail's eyes widened slightly. This was better than she could have hoped. And you can revoke his access. I can do more than that, Isabella said. Our corporate charter, the one I drafted, has a specific clause. Article 9, Section B, regarding gross financial misconduct by an executive officer. It allows the board or a co-founding partner with a significant stake to enact an emergency financial quarantine to protect the company's assets, pending a full investigation. It requires a preliminary burden of proof. She pushed a sleek flash drive across the desk. There's your proof. Every photo, every receipt, every video. It's all time-stamped. Abigail took the drive, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. Isabella Rossi, he should have never ever crossed you. The rest of the afternoon was a whirlwind of legal maneuvering. Abigail was in her element, a maestro conducting a symphony of destruction. She drafted injunctions, temporary restraining orders, and official notices to the financial institutions that held Nexus Pay's primary accounts. She worked with Isabella to navigate the labyrinthine financial system she herself had designed. Isabella sat at a conference table, a laptop in front of her fingers flying across the keyboard. She was no longer a wife or a mother-to-be. She was a master programmer, a hacker, reclaiming her own system. She accessed the Nexus Pay mainframe, her old credentials still perfectly valid. She navigated through firewalls and security layers that Ethan's high-paid IT team had built on top of her original framework, like adding new paint to a steel door she had forged. She found the accounts Ethan was using. They were cleverly disguised, labeled as promotional ventures or European market research. The money trail was clear, flowing out to charter companies, luxury retailers, and exclusive resorts. With a series of keystrokes, she triggered the Isabella protocol. She rerouted authorization requests, flagged the accounts for immediate suspension, and for the final critical step, she changed the master access passwords, locking him out of the very system that gave him his power. The last step was the personal accounts. Their main joint, checking their investment portfolio, the myriad of credit cards held in both their names. As a legal spouse and an equal partner on the accounts, she had the right. With Abigail's guidance, she called the private bankers at each institution. Her voice was cool and authoritative. I'm invoking a security freeze on all accounts, effective immediately, due to suspected fraudulent activity, she told one stone-faced banker after another. She sent them the legal notices Abigail had prepared as confirmation. By 5 p.m., it was done. Every wire was tripped. Every door was locked. Every digital pathway to the vast sterling fortune, both corporate and personal, was severed. From his sun-drenched yacht in the Mediterranean, Ethan Sterling was now, for all intents and purposes, financially stranded. Isabella leaned back in her chair, the adrenaline slowly beginning to fade, replaced by a profound and weary emptiness. It was a brutal, devastating move, but he had left her no choice. Abigail came and stood beside her, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. It's done. The banks have confirmed. The corporate accounts are quarantined. His cards will be declined. The wires for the final yacht payment will not go through. He's cut off. Isabella nodded, staring out the window at the setting sun. The sky was streaked with orange and purple, a beautiful, violent end to the day. "When do you think he'll find out?" Isabella asked quietly. Abigail allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Well, he's on the Amalfi Coast. My guess. The next time he tries to buy a bottle of champagne, or when he tries to pay the yacht's captain his final installment. Paradise is about to get very, very expensive for Mr. Sterling. Aboard the Serenity life was a hedonistic dream. The sun was warm, the champagne was perpetually cold, and the sea was a brilliant, impossible blue. Ethan Sterling felt like the master of the universe. He stood at the stern, a fresh flute of bubbly in his hand, watching the dramatic cliffs of Positano slide by. Sienna was beside him, taking a selfie, her lips puckered into a perfect pout. "Isn't this just divine, baby?" she cooed, tilting her phone to get the perfect angle. "My followers are dying. They think I'm with an anonymous European billionaire. Let them think what they want." Ethan chuckled, pulling her close. He felt a surge of power. This was the life. No board meetings, no responsibilities, no heavily pregnant, increasingly serious wife questioning his every move. Isabella, with her talk of budgets and caution, felt a million miles away. He loved her, of course, but she didn't understand the pressures he was under, the kind of grand gestures it took to stay on top. This trip was a necessary release, and Sienna, with her uncomplicated adoration and stunning looks, was the perfect tonic. The day was spent swimming in hidden grottos and sunbathing on the deck. That evening, Ethan planned a grand finale. He had booked the finest table at La Sponda, a Michelin-starred restaurant famous for its romantic, candlelit ambience. He would propose a toast gift, Sienna, another piece of jewelry, and bask in her worship. He swaggered into the yacht's main salon to speak with the captain, a stoic, weathered Italian man named Marco. "Marco, my man," Ethan said jovially. "We'll be docking for the evening. I'll need the tender to take us ashore around 8. Also, let's settle up the final payment for the charter now, so we don't have to worry about it tomorrow." The charter's cost was astronomical, but to Ethan it was a drop in the ocean. He pulled out his Nexus Pay corporate black card, the ultimate symbol of his success. He handed it to the captain, who produced a small portable payment terminal. Marco swiped the card. A moment passed. He swiped it again. A small frown creased his brow. "Is there a problem?" Ethan asked, his good mood dimming slightly. "It says, declined, contact issuer," Marco said, looking up at Ethan, his expression neutral. Ethan laughed it off. "That's impossible. Try it again." "The signal must be weak out here." Marco tried again. Same result. Declined. A flicker of annoyance went through Ethan. "Fine. Technical glitch. Here, use my personal one." He handed over his personal titanium Amex. Marco swiped it. The result was instantaneous. Declined. The annoyance was now turning into a cold knot of dread in Ethan's stomach. This made no sense. He had unlimited credit. He was the credit. "This is ridiculous." He snapped, his voice sharper than he intended. "There must be some kind of security alert because of the international transactions. I'll just call the bank." He retreated to his cabin, Sienna calling after him. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" "Just fine," he called back, forcing a cheerfulness he did not feel. He dialed his private banker, a man who usually answered his calls day or night. It went straight to voicemail. He tried the corporate card services. He was put on hold, subjected to infuriating hold music. Finally, a junior-level agent picked up. "Yes, I'm calling about a hold on my account. Ethan Sterling, CEO of Nexus Pay." He said his name with the weight he believed it carried. There was a clatter of keys, a long pause. "Sir, I see your account here. It has been placed on an executive security freeze by your company's financial control board, pending an investigation into, asset misappropriation." "What?" Ethan's voice was a strangled whisper. "That's impossible. I am the financial control. Who authorized that? The authorization came from the co-founder's office, sir. A Ms. Isabella Rossi. The world tilted on its axis. Isabella Izzy. It was absurd. A mistake. She couldn't do that. She wouldn't know how. His hands shaking, he tried to log into the Nexus Pay corporate portal on his phone. Access denied. He tried to check his personal investment portfolio. Account frozen. Panic cold and absolute began to claw its way up his throat. He felt like he was drowning. He stumbled out onto the deck, his face pale. Sienna looked up from her phone, her perfect smile faltering. Ethan, you look like you've seen a ghost. My cards. They're not working. He mumbled the words, feeling alien in his mouth. Sienna's expression changed instantly. The adoration vanished, replaced by a shrewd, calculating look. What do you mean they're not working? Did you forget to pay the bill or something? Just then, Captain Marco approached them, his face grim. Mr. Sterling, I have just received an email from the charter company. The wire transfer for the final payment, which was due today, has been cancelled. They inform me that unless payment of the outstanding balance is made in full, within the hour via certified funds, I am under instruction to terminate the charter, confiscate your luggage as collateral, and return to port. Alone. The humiliation washed over Ethan in a sickening wave. Confiscate his luggage. Stranded. It was a nightmare. This is a misunderstanding, he blustered, trying to regain some semblance of control. My wife. She must have made a mistake. Sienna let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of any humor. Oh, I don't think this was a mistake, Ethan. Your pregnant wife, I think she's a lot smarter than you gave her credit for. She stood up, her entire demeanor changing from seductive plaything to pragmatic survivor. So let me get this straight. You have no money. We're about to be kicked off this yacht. My brand new bracelet is probably going to get repossessed. No, I'll fix this, Ethan insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. He was starting to understand the sheer terrifying scope of what Isabella had done. She hadn't just gotten angry, she had performed a surgical strike. She had used the very system he was so proud of to completely incapacitate him. The sun began to set, casting long, mocking shadows across the deck. The dream was over. The champagne tasted bitter. The sea looked cold and menacing. Paradise had become a prison, and he was trapped thousands of miles from home with a furious captain, a disgusted mistress, and not a single dollar to his name. All he had was a useless phone, and the dawning, horrific realization that he had catastrophically, monumentally underestimated his wife. Getting back to New York was the most humiliating experience of Ethan Sterling's life. Stripped of his luggage and dignity, he had to make a groveling phone call to David Foster, his old college roommate and a minority partner at Nexus Pay, to beg for a loan to buy a plane ticket. David, a cautious and principled man who had long been wary of Ethan's excesses, agreed, but his voice was cold and clipped. The news of the financial quarantine was already spreading through the upper echelons of the company. When Ethan finally walked into their Park Avenue penthouse, he looked like a ghost of his former self. His expensive linen suit was crumpled, he hadn't shaved, and the confident swagger was replaced by a haunted, desperate air. Isabella was waiting for him. She wasn't in the living room. She was in the office, her office now. She was sitting behind the large mahogany desk, her laptop open, a stack of legal documents neatly arranged beside her. She was wearing a simple but elegant maternity dress, and her pregnancy was more pronounced than he remembered. She looked powerful, serene, in control. She didn't look up when he entered. She simply continued typing for a moment before finishing her thought, then folded her hands over her belly and finally met his gaze. Her eyes were not filled with tears or rage. They were cold and clear like a winter sky. Isabella, what have you done? He began, his voice a mixture of anger and pleading. This is insane. You've jeopardized the entire company, our life. You froze everything. No, Ethan, she said, her voice calm and steady, cutting through his blustering. I secured the company. I protected our assets. Your assets, it turns out, were a woman named Sienna, a yacht on the Amalfi Coast, and a diamond bracelet from Capri. Those were not sanctioned corporate expenditures. He flinched as if she had struck him. You were spying on me. You broadcast your affair on the internet. All I did was watch, she replied without emotion. But that isn't what this is about. Your infidelity is a symptom of the real problem. You became reckless, arrogant. You started treating the company I helped build as your personal piggy bank. You put everything we worked for at risk for cheap thrills. I did what was necessary to stop the bleeding. Ethan stared at her dumbfounded. This was not the Izzy he knew. The quiet, supportive woman who deferred to his judgment was gone. In her place was a formidable stranger. This is my company, he finally roared, slamming his hand on the desk. I'm the CEO. You can't just— I can, she interrupted, unflinching. And I have. Article 9, Section B. B of the Corporate Charter. Gross financial misconduct. The evidence is overwhelming. Abigail Chen has already convened an emergency meeting of the board for tomorrow morning. David Foster is in full support. They're voting to have you suspended as CEO, pending a full audit. His face went white. David. He had turned David against him too. You planned this. All of it. You planned a romantic getaway with your mistress while your pregnant wife was at home. I planned a corporate restructuring. I think my plan was better, she said, her voice dripping with ice. Desperation began to set in. He tried a different tactic, the one that had always worked before. He softened his voice, his expression morphing into one of pained remorse. Izzy, baby, I'm so sorry. I messed up. I was stressed the pressure. It doesn't mean anything. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. Please, we can fix this. Just undo it. Tell the banks it was a misunderstanding. We can go to counseling. We have a child on the way. Our son. Think about our family. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. Our family is the only thing I have been thinking about, she said, her eyes finally showing a flicker of the deep hurt he had caused. I've been thinking about what kind of example I want to set for our son. And it is not to be a woman who quietly accepts disrespect and betrayal. It is not to be a doormat to a man who sees her as an accessory. She slid a thick document across the desk towards him. This is a post-nuptial agreement drafted by Abigail. It's also a separation agreement and a proposal for a corporate buyout. He stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake. A buyout. It's very simple, Ethan. You have two choices. Choice A, we fight. We drag this through the courts and the press. The board will fire you. The audit will expose every dirty little secret, and your reputation will be permanently destroyed. After a long and ugly battle, I will get half of everything anyway, and Nexus Pay will be severely damaged in the process. She paused, letting the words sink in. Or, choice B, you sign this. You resign as CEO effective immediately. You cede your voting shares to me, making me the majority stakeholder. In exchange, I will not contest the divorce, and you will receive a generous but fixed severance package, enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life, but not enough to ever build a rival empire again. The story we will give the press is that you are stepping down for personal and health reasons to focus on your family. It's a quiet, clean exit. You get to save face. The company is protected, and our son is born into a stable environment, not a war zone. He was speechless. It was a checkmate, a flawless, brutal, perfectly executed coup. She had thought of everything. She had left him with no moves, no options, no leverage. He was a king who had been toppled from his throne without a single shot being fired. You would do that, he whispered, his voice cracking. Take my company from me. Isabella stood up, her pregnancy making the movement slow and deliberate. She walked to the window and looked out at the city below. You seem to be under a misapprehension, Ethan, she said her back to him. You think you're losing your company. The truth is, you're just giving it back. The fallout was swift, but surprisingly quiet, just as Isabella had planned. The headline in the Wall Street Journal read, Nexus Pay Visionary, Ethan Sterling steps down, co-founder Isabella Rossi takes helm. The article cited personal reasons and a desire to focus on his impending fatherhood. It was a masterfully spun piece of corporate PR painting Ethan as a devoted family man rather than a disgraced executive. He had taken choice B. There was never really any other option. Ethan Sterling, the titan of tech, vanished from the public eye. He took his severance and moved to a modest condo in Miami, a world away from the power corridors of New York. He was financially secure but stripped of his identity. He was no longer the king. He was just a man with a lot of money, and even more regret. The high-powered friends stopped calling. The party invitations dried up. Sienna Hayes, after a few desperate attempts to rekindle things, realized his influence was gone, and promptly blocked his number, moving on to find her next anonymous European billionaire. In New York, Isabella thrived. Taking over as CEO of Nexus Pay wasn't a challenge. It was a homecoming. She had been the shadow CEO for years, and now stepping into the light felt natural. The board, initially wary, was quickly won over by her sharp intellect, her deep understanding of the technology, and her clear, no-nonsense vision for the future. She trimmed the fat of Ethan's vanity projects, refocusing the company on innovation and sustainable growth. Morale, which had suffered under Ethan's increasingly erratic leadership, soared. The stock price, after a brief dip, climbed to an all-time high. She moved out of the cold Park Avenue penthouse and bought a warm, light-filled brownstone in Brooklyn. She filled it not with priceless art, but with comfortable furniture, shelves of books, and the happy clutter of impending motherhood. Olivia was a constant presence, helping her set up the nursery and acting as her fierce protector and closest confidant. 2 months after the takeover, Isabella gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Lorenzo Rossi. She gave him her name, her legacy. Holding Lorenzo in her arms in the quiet of the night, Isabella would sometimes think of Ethan. There was no hatred left, only a lingering sadness for the man he used to be and the partnership they had lost. Her actions had not been born of vengeance, but of necessity. It was the ultimate act of self-preservation for herself, her child, and the empire she had built. She had refused to be a footnote in her own life story. She became a new kind of icon, not a socialite or an influencer, but a brilliant, powerful woman who had taken control of her own destiny. She was a mother, a CEO, and the architect of her own life. She was rarely photographed, but when she was, it was entering her office, a leather briefcase in one hand and a baby bag in the other, a picture of modern strength. The story of Ethan Sterling's downfall and Isabella Rossi's ascent became a quiet legend in the boardrooms and back channels of the financial world. It was a cautionary tale about hubris, a lesson in never underestimating the quiet ones. Ethan thought he was taking a mistress on a yacht trip. What he was really doing was abdicating his throne. He just didn't realize it until his queen had already changed the locks on the castle. And in the end, Isabella didn't just freeze his bank accounts overnight. She reclaimed her power, rebuilt her life, and proved that the greatest asset she ever had was herself. 1 year later, the world had settled into its new alignment. Nexus Pay, under the steady and innovative hand of CEO Isabella Rossi, was more respected and profitable than ever. Isabella had become an emblem of quiet strength in the business world, known for her strategic brilliance and her refusal to engage with the sensationalism that often courted female leaders. Her personal life was her sanctuary. The Brooklyn brownstone was a home filled with light laughter and the delightful chaos of a 1-year-old. The occasion was Lorenzo's first birthday. It was not a grand affair like the parties Ethan would have thrown, filled with press and people they barely knew. This was an intimate gathering in her sun-drenched garden. Olivia was there, playfully, dangling a stuffed giraffe in front of Lorenzo, who sat happily in his high chair, smears of cake on his cheeks. A few close friends from her pre-Nexus pay life mingled with trusted members of her new executive team. Her mother, beaming, was cutting another slice of the homemade cake. The atmosphere was one of genuine warmth and joy. Isabella, dressed in a simple sundress, felt a deep, uncomplicated happiness she hadn't realized was possible. She was watching Lorenzo giggle when the doorbell chimed. Assuming it was the last of her invited guests, she wiped her hands on a napkin and walked through the house to the front door, a smile on her face. When she opened it, the smile vanished. Standing on her stoop was Ethan. He was a different man from the one who had stumbled into their penthouse a year ago, defeated and disheveled. He was also a stranger from the arrogant king who had sailed off on the Serenity. He was thinner, his face carrying new lines that spoke of sleepless nights and hard-won sobriety. His once perfect hair was shorter, simpler. He wore a plain grey polo shirt and jeans, clothes that were well-made but anonymous. The aura of entitlement was gone, replaced by a heavy, nervous stillness. In his hands, he held a single, beautifully wrapped gift. A protective chill went through Isabella. Her first instinct was to slam the door. Olivia, sensing the sudden silence, appeared in the hallway behind her, her expression hardening into a glare at the sight of Ethan. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" Isabella's voice was low, devoid of welcome. "Isabella," he said, his voice raspy, as if he hadn't used it much that day. "I know I have no right. I know I wasn't invited. I did it. I just wanted to be here. Not for the party, just to see him. It's his first birthday. He didn't try to push past her. He didn't make demands. He stood on the bottom step, a supplicant at the gates of a life he had thrown away." "That's not a good idea," Olivia said sharply. From behind Isabella, "You should leave." Ethan's eyes flickered to Olivia, then back to Isabella, filled with a weary resignation, as if he had expected this. "I know. I'll go. Can I leave this for him?" He gestured with the gift. Isabella looked at the box. It was small, tastefully wrapped in blue paper, with a simple white ribbon. It wasn't a flashy, expensive toy meant to buy affection. It looked thoughtful. Against her better judgment, she found herself hesitating. This was a moment she had played out in her mind 1,000 times, and in every version she had been a fortress of righteous anger. But seeing him now, stripped of all his former bravado, looking not like a monster, but simply like a broken man, stirred something other than contempt. It was a faint, unwelcome flicker of pity. "Come inside," she said, her voice tight. The words surprised herself as much as they did Olivia and Ethan. "Not to the party. In the study." Olivia shot her a look of pure disbelief, but Isabella gave a slight shake of her head. She was in control here. This was her house, her life. He was a ghost, and she would not be haunted by him. She led him to the small study at the front of the house, a room filled with books and a single framed photo of Lorenzo on the desk. She closed the door, shutting out the sounds of the happy celebration in the back. The silence in the room was deafening. "Why are you really here, Ethan?" she asked, crossing her arms. He finally met her gaze, and for the first time she saw the full depth of his regret. It wasn't the manipulative performance from their last meeting. This was a raw, hollowed-out shame. "To apologize," he said quietly. "Not in the way I did before. Not to get something from you. I've had a year to think. A long, quiet year. I've had to look at myself without the money, without the company, without you. And I didn't like what I saw." He took a breath. "You didn't just beat me, Isabella. You showed me who I had become. A caricature, a cliché, a man so blinded by his own reflection, he couldn't see the masterpiece standing right next to him. I didn't just betray you, I erased you, and that's the crime I can't forgive myself for." Isabella remained silent, listening. The words were the right ones, but she had become an expert at detecting his manipulations. Yet this felt different. This felt like a confession. "I'm not looking for forgiveness," he continued, as if reading her mind. "I don't deserve it. And I'm not asking for a second chance. I just want, if it's at all possible to not be a complete void in my son's life, I want him to know I exist, that I'm sorry, that his mother is the most brilliant, formidable woman I have ever known. He placed the gift on the corner of her desk. It's a book, a collection of classic children's stories. My father used to read it to me. It's the only thing I have left from my childhood. The sincerity of the gesture, its simple, profound link to a past before all the money and corruption, was the one thing that managed to breach her defenses. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about Lorenzo. What was best for him? A fatherless life or a life with a flawed, repentant father, kept at a very safe distance. She made a decision, not with her heart, but with the cool, strategic mind that now governed her life. You can see him. For 5 minutes. Olivia will be in the room. Relief washed over Ethan's face so intensely that he seemed to shrink. "Thank you," he whispered. "Isabella, thank you." She led him not to the garden, but to the quiet living room where Olivia brought Lorenzo. The moment Ethan saw his son, his composure broke. Tears welled in his eyes as he crouched down. Lorenzo, curious and unafraid, simply stared at this strange new face. Ethan slowly extended a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Lorenzo reached out and wrapped his tiny fingers around Ethan's thumb. Isabella watched from the doorway, her heart a tangled knot of conflicting emotions. She felt the ghost of a love that once was the sharp pain of betrayal and the fierce, protective instinct of a mother. She saw not a triumphant victory, but the tragic, messy reality of a shattered family. After 5 minutes as promised, she stepped forward. "It's time to go, Ethan." He stood up, wiping his eyes. He looked at her, his expression one of pure, unadulterated gratitude. He didn't say another word, simply nodded and walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back one last time. "You built a good life here, Isabella. A real one. You deserve it." And then he was gone. Isabella returned to the garden, to the laughter and the sunlight, feeling as though she had just passed through a storm. She had faced the past and had not let it derail her present. She had set the new terms of engagement, strict, supervised, and entirely on her schedule. She had given her son a chance to know his father's face, but she had protected her own hard-won peace. She picked up Lorenzo, held him close, and breathed in the sweet scent of baby powder and birthday cake. The reign of Ethan Sterling was long over. The age of Isabella Rossi was just beginning. The story of Ethan and Isabella isn't just a tale of wealth and infidelity. It's a masterclass in underestimating the person you promised to cherish. It's a stark reminder that true power isn't found in the balance of a bank account or the glamour of a yacht, but in quiet intelligence, unshakable resolve, and the knowledge you hold. Isabella didn't just get revenge. She executed a flawless corporate strategy to protect her legacy and secure her child's future. She didn't just leave a toxic marriage. She took back her empire and redefined her own life on her own terms, building a new reign on the ashes of betrayal. What did you think of Isabella's move? Was it a brilliant act of empowerment or a cold, calculated takeover? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of justice and strategy, prove you're not a robot and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who appreciates a good power play, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next real-life drama we uncover.